Welcome to the Harlan J. Strauss Working Filmmaker Talk. My name is Masami Kawai. I'm a filmmaker and assistant professor here at the University of Oregon in the Cinema Studies Department. I'm excited to be talking with this year's visiting filmmaker, Mollye Asher, who will be co-teaching the art of producing with me. Mollye Asher is the recipient of the 2020 Independent Spirit Producers Award, and her films with Chloé Zhao, the writer, and Songs My Brothers Taught Me, both screened at Cannes, Directors Fortnight, Sundance, and many other festivals. As part of Mollye's visit to the University of Oregon, we'll be screening Nomadland, which won the Golden Lion from the Venice Film Festival and has been nominated for multiple Oscars, including Best Picture. In addition, we'll be screening another film she's produced, Swallow, which won Best Actress at the Tribeca Film Festival. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Mollye. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So as I've done like a little bit of research on you, I realized that you were an actor previous to becoming a producer. You know, I saw that you started out as a theater actor, you found your way to film, and then found your way behind the camera. And, you know, most people gravitate towards writing or directing. I'm really interested to hear like what pulled you towards pursuing producing.
Well, yeah, I was a frustrated theater actor. Along with some other frustrated theater actors, we decided to make a short film and that I would then act in, and I hope never sees the light of day. But yeah, I found that I just loved the whole process of putting the film together. Everything from finding the crew to locations to the editing process. So it was really from there that filmmaking opened up for me, the whole idea of it. And you know, I was a writer as well, and so when I decided to go to film school, I wanted to go to NYU, where I would have the opportunity to learn all of the various elements of filmmaking. But producing, I've leaned more to, I think, in a way, because I ended up, well, I go always with the doors open, I think, but there's just an opportunity as a producer, I think, to really advocate for people and projects that I believe in. That just is, it just has become something that I just feel very passionate about.
That's really interesting. I'm also thinking about, like, as an actor, you're so connected with like the emotional truth of your character. I'm wondering if any of those skills as like a performer, do you feel like any of those skills have like found their way into how you approach producing?
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, working with a writer on their scripts, I think it's always character first, really. And so when I'm reading it, I am reading it coming from a background of breaking down a script as an actor and motivation and beat changes. So it definitely comes into play when I'm developing scripts. And then you know, I've thought about this a lot on the campaign trail for Nomadland, because we talk a lot about listening, and that we had a crew of listeners. I know that Frances McDormand is an amazing listener, and that's of course a big part of acting. And I think that has been a part of my producing style, specifically working in communities that are not, you know, used to filming, or who are not actors.
So do you feel like you'd ever go back to acting or directing?
Not acting, but I did really love directing in film school. So, but I found that while I did like writing short stories, I did not enjoy the process of screenwriting. So that sort of stalled my, you know, I was intending on doing a thesis film that I would write and direct, but I could never get myself to sit down and write. So, but maybe in the future, who knows what the future holds.
That's great. That's interesting. Well, you kind of spoke about how you develop a project with a writer, but can you kind of just talk about your approach to producing generally?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I need to understand the vision of the filmmaker. I work a lot with writer directors, so that's where I'm speaking from. But that's like the number one thing that prompts me to work on a project, and that sustains me working on a project, and that's what I have to make sure happens for the filmmaker, you know, giving them all of the space they need, and the both like legally and production wise, you know, all senses. So I think that's my first and foremost. You know, it just it can take so long to make a film. There can be so many ups and downs, and I'm inspired by filmmakers, and I think that that's during those ups and downs, as we're trying to get a project off the ground, and you know, I can always go back to the filmmaker and why I originally signed on to a project, because it's the filmmaker first, and that will keep me inspired through those challenges.
And so you're saying that your approach to producing is really grounded in finding a writer director's vision that you jump on board with.
Yes, yeah, I'm first and foremost filmmaker first. So I like, even before reading a script, like it's more important to me that I find filmmakers that I think have an interesting point of view or perspective, and a bold way of expressing it.
So I did read, like, I know that I was going to save this question for later, but I know that you started co-founded a production company with Manette Louie and Derek Wynn.
Mhm.
I've heard you speak about how that you would produce like a range of films, both ones that you can kind of sustain that yourself with, kind of maybe more of that writer director driven, but that you were also interested in productions that maybe were more geared towards maybe a project that could have been housed or partially housed in a studio. So are you still interested in like a writer director with those like larger projects, or are you really using that to kind of sustain and balance your career, or financially balance like your slate of films?
Ideally, I can do both, you know, take a project that's a writer director to a mini studio, or, you know, get the rights to a book, have it adapted by a writer, and maybe bring on a director. I think it's really just project to project, but I do, yes, want to have that balance of being able to make those smaller first features, because I find them really exciting, but also being able to make something larger, and that might have an opportunity to reach larger audiences.
I mean, and that's pretty interesting, because that's pretty much what you've been able to do with Chloe. You've worked on her first feature, and clearly Nomadland is reaching a much larger audience. Can you talk more about the collaboration you've had with Chloe specifically?
Sure. Well, we met in 2007 when we started film school, and we were friends first, which I think is a really nice way to begin a working relationship. I like to think that I'm friends with all the filmmakers I work with. Feel like you kind of have to be. But yeah, so when she wanted to make her first feature, she came to me as someone who she knew from school was a really hands-on production producer, and we had quite a journey trying to make that movie. We had every step of the way there was a challenge. Every step of the way we you know, had an idea of how things were going to turn out, and then they didn't, but really like stuck it through. And I think we both have a similar part of our personalities that doesn't want to take no for an answer. And so, you know, I think it was just then made sense for the writer, and then for Nomadland, for us to continue to work together in this sort of untraditional way that we work, that has been developed over the years of making these projects.
So all of your films so far have been, you've produced films from your classmates from NYU. And I'm wondering, you know, I really try to encourage my students to build relationships and value their classmates, because, you know, their careers are long, and you never know who you're going to collaborate with in the future. Can you talk about how you cultivated those relationships during film school and afterwards?
During film school, I was very conscious of looking and seeing who were the filmmakers that I wanted to work with. Like from the very beginning, I was almost like eagle-eyed, like, and the way that I cultivated the relationships was by either working with them, or friendships. Some of the filmmakers that I've worked with, I didn't actually go to school with, and so those relationships were made by mutual friends introduced us.
Well, one thing you said that I thought was interesting, which is that you had this like really sharp eye and like looking and noticing your classmates, their work and just who they were. And, you know, when I think of interesting producers, the strongest thing that kind of it becomes apparent to me is a sense of taste and a sense of like having a strong sense of the kind of film that they want to pursue in terms of developing. So do you feel like at this time during film school, you were aware of your desire to be a producer? Like, did you see this as like one of the skills you had?
Yes, and when I was looking to find collaborators, it was with the desire to produce for them, and so I was looking at, like, yes, their skill as a filmmaker, the kinds of stories they were telling, how they treated the other filmmakers in the class, because that's, I think, really important. It shows then how you would treat your crew and your cast.
I guess to kind of like delve into your work a little bit more, I feel like your work has like all of your films are actually pretty political, but they're kind of grounded in character and story, right? They're not really issue-based films, but they still kind of can resonate in this like political register as well. So I want to know more like what draws you to material.
Yeah, I didn't choose projects because they necessarily have any kind of political angle. I think that when I am looking for projects, I'm drawn to ones that seem like they're of this time, that they need to be told now. And I think then I think that probably leads to them having in some way some sort of like social political um, grounding underneath it. Um, I also come from a family of like of really, my grandmother was like a union organizer, you know, just very uh, like our dinner table conversations were often about what was going on in the news. And, you know, I wasn't going to necessarily go and be a politician, you know, but because I wanted to create art. But I think that probably was infused in some way into my perspective.
Yeah, I think they're definite. It feels evident from just your body of work, and I can really hear or kind of see your voice through watching
Hmm,
all of these films.
that's
Um,
interesting.
so I guess I'm wondering if, especially because you know the students will be graduating this year, and they've just gone through a year of the pandemic. They're going to be facing many challenges as they begin their careers. I was wondering if you could speak to those challenges and maybe reflect on any challenges you faced in your career.
Yeah, I mean, it's daunting to be in school and have that kind of you know, rigor where you have things due at a certain time, and then to suddenly be out of school and making your own schedule and not to have the kind of your classmates around you. So, and I definitely felt that after I finished the courses. And so I really thought it was important, and I would encourage them to remain active with each other. You know, I would do, when we could in person, do like, make sure I did like once a month coffees with people just to like see what they were doing. We could commiserate, we could celebrate. And a lot of times like work actually then came from my peers. But I think that's a really important thing to make sure that you stay active in the community, because if you can start to feel very alone, I think, as a freelance filmmaker. And while there can be some good things that come out of that, it can also isolate you in a way that can make it harder to jump back in and start, you know, jump back into filmmaking or start your career.
Was there any specific obstacle that you faced early in your career where it even made you question whether this was the path for you?
Certainly. It's just so hard financially to make a living. And so I really, really struggled. And I was trying to get my foot in the door to produce commercials, because that seemed to be the way that a lot of indie producers made a living. And I never quite got my foot in that door. But I started to produce industrials and things like that. But I remember at one point thinking like I'm gonna have to start waitressing again. You know, this was after songs, after She's Lost Control, Fort Tilden, and I was like, had a film play Sundance, Cannes, and I can't make a living. And that was a really tough time. And I remember my sister coming up to New York to just kind of help me sort of work through that. I think I was a little overwhelmed. Um, but in the end, I think it's like perseverance and just continuing to push through and continuing to try and make it work. And there's so many different ways too that I found ways to make money. Like I had to teach myself bookkeeping because I couldn't afford accountants on films, and so then I became a bookkeeper for a small production company. But yeah, like finding the financial stability was certainly the toughest part.
Yeah, I don't think people think about that reality. I mean, having such success like She's Lost Control and songs and going to Cannes, and then still having to face like the reality of trying to pay your bills on a freelance filmmaker's salary is quite daunting. And I don't think students quite have the understanding of what the level of perseverance you need to be able to keep pushing through and to believe in yourself as a filmmaker. So you're quite a testament to that for sure. I'm really excited that we had just this time to connect, and I look forward to the co-teaching that we'll do, and also your upcoming screenings that you have at the University of Oregon.
Yeah, I'm really excited too.